Morning everyone. I'm talking to you on a beautiful, bright, sunny day after a really grey and murky start, and I'm hoping for the weather to be good for the next few days as we're going away for a few days to Herefordshire. So Tom and I have swapped next Monday's thought for the day so that I've got a bit of time to have a thought for the day, and I'll be back with you next Tuesday. Well, in Tom's last thought, he spoke about my adventure with a wasp, because I'd spoken about that on Monday, and he said how interesting my life must be, and that made me laugh. Well, anyway, I've had another encounter with wildlife, because on Tuesday I had an altercation with a chicken, and I thought I'd broken 3 of my toes. At this point, I have to inform you that the chicken was dead. It was no more. It had run down the curtain and joined the choir as invisible, and it had seen its demise before the incident. It was also frozen. I'd gone to the freezer to get the said chicken out of the freezer for dinner, and the bag that it was in had a tear in, so it slipped out and landed on my foot. Unfortunately, it happened to be a rather large chicken, weighing around 2.5 kilos. I wasn't wearing shoes, and my toes immediately became swollen and very painful. Anyway, I waited for a while before deciding to go to A&E, where they eventually assured me that nothing was broken and it was just very bruised. I went to A&E so that I could get out of a church meeting being held at the same time. It's not true. Anyway, I've taken the following action. I've ordered 2 pairs of steel-capped industrial boots, 1 pair for each of us, to be used when removing a chicken from the freezer. I've also put safety signs on the freezer that it's not to be opened without the wearing of the said boots, even if it's only to fetch out 2 ounces of mince, because you can't be too careful, can you? Anyway, enough of that nonsense. To more serious things. I was saddened to read in The Guardian on Tuesday that robots who can hold simple conversations are to be employed in some care homes in the UK, following a trial that suggests they could boost mental health and reduce loneliness. Now, I know this is a serious proposal, but when I thought about it, I just found this ultimately a sad indictment of our modern society. I know technology has an important role in our lives. I'm using technology now. Most of us use computers and mobile phones to communicate, and we have at our means an ease of communication beyond anything our ancestors could have ever imagined. And yet there's been this identification of an epidemic of loneliness, not just amongst older people, but across the generations. But the question that I ask myself is, why are we looking to technology and not to each other to alleviate loneliness and ease mental health? I mean, in this case, it's in care homes. Many years ago, when I was training to be a social worker, I had to complete a placement in an old people's home. And I met in that home a fairly young man who I can only describe it as he dripped with loneliness and sadness. And he was in his 40s and was suffering the late stages of Parkinson's disease. He was black. He was effectively shunned by the rest of the residents. No one spoke to him. He'd been placed there because there was nowhere else to place him. His name was Tony. When it was mealtime, he would take so long getting to the dining room because of his shuffling gait. By the time he got there, everyone had finished eating. He'd also been put on a table on his own because of his messy eating, which was caused by his Parkinson's disease. And my heart cried out for him. Over the period of the placement, I built up a relationship with him. I learnt to decipher his speech, and we had some good conversations and some laughter too. And I was called into the office, the manager's office, on several occasions, because instead of seeing to the practical needs of everyone, such as toileting and bathing, I was spending too much time talking to Tony and also to others. I was told this wasn't my role. I was not there to sit around. When I left, I had to tell Tony that I wouldn't be back, and tears just brimmed up in his eyes and fell. Mine too. And when I left, I had to tell Tony I wouldn't be back. I learned that he died some weeks later. Such a lonely, lonely time. And now this was many years ago, and I'm not judging all care homes or staff in care homes, not at all. But it highlighted for me that the focus on the physical, the essential focus on the physical, coupled with limited staff time and understaffing, left little space for attention to the human need for contact other than that related to those physical needs. You know, I'm aware that adult care has been in crisis for many years and has been underfunded. Staff are generally poorly paid, have limited access to training and support, and yet we're now talking about robots to fulfill a need that is essentially human. It makes little sense to me. Can you imagine the costs of research that's gone into that? It doesn't make sense to me. And I'm not somebody who's anti-technology. You see, the growing individualism in Western society has engendered unprecedented social isolation and yielded a depth of loneliness perhaps not in evidence in previous times. But God made us for each other. We are relational beings. We need friendship. We need social connectedness and community. And how much more do we need these things as we become more frail and more dependent? Mother Teresa once said that life without other people is the worst disease any human being can experience. And there's a philosopher called James K.A. Smith, and he suggested that the shift in the Western mind from primarily religious to primarily secular has coincided with the rise of that individualism that creates loneliness. And even neuroscience supports this. They've made startling discoveries of how the human brain responds to the social world, discoveries that were not possible before. And the findings repeatedly reinforce the conclusion that our brains are wired to connect to other people. In other words, our brains are social. And these discoveries also reveal the power of social isolation to adversely affect our brains. Now, Jesus models perfect being in relationship for us. He was never not in relationship. He entered this world not by splitting the heavens and descending, but by gently growing in his mother's womb. He entered a normal family, spent his childhood and early adulthood in obscurity, and launched his ministry by inviting others to follow him. And even on the eve of his crucifixion, he gathered for a meal with his disciples. Then he led them to pray with him at Gethsemane. With his final breaths, he instructed his disciples to care for his mother. And like Jesus, we exist for relationships, created in the image of a triune, and therefore always eternally relational God. To be fully alive means to live in relationships. If Jesus was history's most fully alive human, it shouldn't surprise us that a person can't become fully human, really, without community. Simply put, we were created for community. So if I'm lucky enough to live a long life, I don't want to be conversing with a robot. I want the touch of a human hand, the soft sounds of a human voice, and the understanding of a human heart. And that's what God intends for us. And who am I to disagree? Well, I'll see you all on Tuesday, and as always, take care of yourself, and God bless. Bye-bye.